You hear yourself on a voicemail, a video, a voice note you accidentally sent before listening back, and your immediate visceral reaction is delete it. Delete everything. Move countries. You sound nothing like what you hear in your head. It's too nasally, too flat, too loud, too soft, and somehow all of those things at once. And for a brief, painful moment, you wonder how anyone has ever agreed to have a conversation with you. Sound familiar? Good. Because what's happening in your brain right now is far more interesting than you think. Here's the thing. This isn't a you problem. This is a everybody problem. Surveys consistently show that the majority of people dislike the sound of their own recorded voice. Celebrities hate it. Professors hate it. That one annoyingly confident person in your office, they hate it too. They just don't say so. You've probably never met someone who listened to their own voicemail and thought, wow, I sound incredible, like warm honey poured over velvet. That person doesn't exist, or if they do, they probably have other issues. But why? Why does the voice you live inside of, the voice you use every single day, feel like a stranger when you hear it back? Here's where it gets interesting. There's a phenomenon called auditory self-perception bias, and it explains everything. When you speak, you hear your voice through two completely different channels simultaneously. One is air conduction, the sound waves traveling outward, bouncing off the room, and entering your ears from the outside. That's what other people hear. But you also hear your voice through bone conduction, vibrations that travel through the bones and tissue of your skull directly to your inner ear. And here's the kicker. Bone conduction transmits lower frequencies more efficiently. That means the voice you hear from the inside is warmer, richer, and deeper than what actually comes out. In other words, your brain has been lying to you your entire life about what you sound like, every single day. The voice you've been walking around thinking you have? A fiction. A beautiful, acoustically enhanced fiction your skull has been producing for you as a courtesy. And then a recording rips that courtesy away. But wait, it gets worse, or more fascinating. Depends how you look at it. Because the voice problem isn't just physical. It's not just the bones. There's something psychological layered underneath, and this is the part nobody talks about. When you hear a recording of yourself, you're not just hearing unfamiliar acoustics. You're hearing yourself the way other people hear you, and that is a profoundly disorienting experience for the human brain. It's like suddenly seeing yourself on a security camera when you thought you were alone. Same person, completely different feeling. Your brain has a very carefully curated internal self-image. How you think you come across, how you think you sound, the energy you think you're projecting. And then a recording shows you the external version of you. And those two versions don't always match. That gap, that's where the cringe lives. Psychologists have a term for this, the self-discrepancy theory developed by Torrey Higgins in the late 1980s. The theory says we operate with multiple versions of ourselves in our heads at the same time. There's the actual self, who you really are, the ideal self, who you want to be, and the ought self, who you think you're supposed to be. When something forces you to confront a gap between these versions, you feel discomfort. Sometimes anxiety, sometimes shame, sometimes just that low-level, skin-crawling ugh feeling you get when you watch yourself on video. Hearing your recorded voice isn't just annoying. It's a mini identity disruption. A small collision between the you you've been narrating in your head and the you that actually exists in the world. And your brain, being the drama queen it is, responds accordingly. And this changes everything, because if that's true, then hating your recorded voice isn't a sign of insecurity. It's actually a sign that you have a rich, developed sense of self. Think about it. You have to have a strong internal self-concept for there to be a gap in the first place. People who've never developed a coherent sense of their own identity, they often have less of a reaction to recordings, less cringe, less discomfort. The more vivid and specific your internal self-image, the more jarring it is when reality doesn't match. So the next time you spiral into horror at the sound of your own voice, congratulations. Neurologically speaking, you have a functioning ego. You're doing great. Here's where science takes this somewhere unexpected. Researchers at the University of Antwerp studied people's reactions to their own recorded voices and found something remarkable. The disgust response wasn't just psychological. It was physiological, heart rate changes, micro expressions. The body genuinely reacts as if it's heard something threatening. Why would your own voice feel threatening? Because from an evolutionary standpoint, how you're perceived by others is critical. Humans are social animals who survived in groups. Being accepted by the group meant survival. Being rejected meant death, literally, for most of human history. So when you hear your recorded voice and think, is that how I sound to people? Your brain isn't being dramatic. It's doing a rapid social threat assessment. It's asking, will this voice get me accepted or rejected? Your cringe is ancient. Your cringe is survival instinct wearing a modern costume. But here's the deeper thing, and this is where it stops being funny and starts being kind of moving. For a lot of people, hating their voice is connected to something bigger. It's not just about the acoustics, it's about visibility. Because your voice is, at a very real level, the most direct external expression of who you are. It carries your emotion, your hesitation, your confidence, your warmth, your anxiety. When you speak, you're not just transmitting information, you're transmitting yourself. And for people who grew up feeling unseen, or who learned early that their expression was unwelcome, that their volume was too much, their opinions were too much, their presence was too much, hating the sound of your voice can be a learned response. It becomes a stand-in for a deeper belief. I am not someone worth listening to. Not everyone who cringes at their voice has this story, but some of you watching this right now just felt something shift in your chest, and I want you to stay with that for a second. Here's where it gets interesting, and this is the reframe that actually works. Studies on voice familiarity show that repeated exposure to your own recorded voice dramatically reduces the discomfort over time. Broadcasters, podcasters, actors, they all go through an initial period of, oh no, and then eventually neutrality, then acceptance, sometimes even preference. This means the disgust response isn't permanent. It's not truth. It's unfamiliarity dressed up as judgment. The voice you're cringing at, other people don't hear it the way you do. They don't have your internal reference point. They don't hear what's missing compared to your skull-enhanced baseline. They just hear a person talking, usually normally, sometimes charmingly, often more likable than you're giving yourself credit for. There's also research showing that when people listen to recordings of strangers versus recordings of themselves, they rate the strangers' voices as significantly more pleasant than their own, even when objective third parties rate both voices equally. Your bias isn't about your voice being bad. It's about your brain being lousy at rating itself fairly. The voice you hate might be the voice someone else finds warm, grounding, real. Their search for hint people fall in love with voices on podcasts, voices that their owners probably cringe at in private. There's a reason people say, I love your voice, and the person receiving that compliment looks genuinely confused, like they've been told they have a great appendix. We are almost always the worst judges of the things that make us most ourselves. Your voice has been with you every single day of your life. It carried you through every hard conversation, every awkward voicemail, every moment you were brave enough to say something out loud instead of keeping it inside. It's been working for you faithfully this whole time. Maybe the problem was never the voice. Maybe the problem was only ever the way you were listening to it. If this resonated, and I mean really resonated, there's a good chance you're someone who lives a lot of your life in your own head. Hyper-aware, self-monitoring, always slightly editing yourself before you speak. And that has a name too, a whole psychology behind it. And honestly, it explains a lot more than just the voice thing. That video is right here, and if you've made it this far, trust me, you'll want to watch it.